from us. Obviously, we'll pass along to Paul now, and hopefully everything goes as planned with no technical issues. But massive shout out to Paul for being willing to do this. Obviously, a lot of our members will know Paul was meant to do a talk for us quite a while ago in HackSoc, so luckily we've managed to get him back to kind of do it again. So I'll pass along to Paul.
So thanks for having me, and I would start off with the sorry because obviously I was supposed to be coming along, as was said by Sarah there a little while ago, to do SQL injection training. I was really doing them so that they were happening at Glasgow DEF CON 1 month after the other, but then I sort of signed up to coming up to yourselves in between the first and second one, so you were going to get a slightly different twist on it in the middle. But there we go. So very much sorry about that one. This evening's talk is going to be not quite as thorough or robust or anything. Hopefully it's just a fun jaunt through something you might not have seen before. But before I move on, for the SQL injection materials, the intro, the intermediate levels, the vulnerable target, the videos explaining them, they're all available there at that link. If you just Google teaching moments and Cornerpirate, you'd find it. So there we go. So let's move on to tonight. What is this then? Exotic Exfil. What this is not is we are not busting Joe Exotic out. That's not what we're doing. I figured that's the most up-to-date reference I could manage. Start of the pandemic, this guy was huge. Seems to have slipped away in the meantime. But let me Google it for you. What is exfiltration? Hopefully you kind of heard of it, but for those that haven't, I'm talking about data exfiltration. I've just Googled it for you there. Data exfiltration is the unauthorized copying, transfer or retrieval of data from a computer or a server. So that's pretty much it. I believe it's rooted in how a lot of cybersecurity is rooted in sort of military background. If you imagine the plot of most films that Matt Damon's in, it's just getting him out of whatever situation he's found himself in. Exfiltration is pretty much that. But in terms of data exfiltration, that's what we're going to focus on, is smuggling out data. So your end game of an attacker breaking in is always to upload tools and then actually extract some stuff. So exfiltration is how they do it. I personally love exotic exfiltration, and I'm going to keep saying exotic exfiltration like it's a thing, and it's totally not a thing that I just came up with when Sarah asked for it at short notice. I just went, exotic exfiltration, I'll make a talk about it. I think we said that on Monday. I just picked it up. So exotic exfiltration, I do like it. If you can send anything out of any restricted environment, you can make it work. So the sort of list there, the 4 things, more or less, I've made tools in my past to exploit all of these things, because I find getting the data back out fairly fascinating. So I like to make my own tooling when I can do it. So I have built a custom DNS server. If you manage a custom DNS server that you write the code for, effectively you can get reverse shell over DNS, not just get the data out, you can send commands back in. You've got a command and control channel, so that's kind of fun to play with. You can also just get data out through DNS resolution. It takes a long time, because effectively you encode whatever file you're trying to get out in the host name, and you just listen on your DNS server for all the requests coming in, then you reconstitute the file based on the host name, so it takes a while. And I think that's a thread running through most of these exotic exfiltration techniques, is really that they're slow. You wouldn't do them if there if there was any other way of getting data out, unless you're trying to be covert or whatever. If the adversary you're up against has decent defensive capabilities, they might detect you if you're exfiltrating data just through like a sort of standard connection. So sometimes exfiltration is about being stealthy, sometimes it's just because it's locked down, and that's mainly what the focus of the talk's about. So I did do that talk that Mike from the Beer Farmers was talking about earlier in 2018. My talk was about using GitHub to hack things, and that's very much born out of my fascination with exotic exfiltration. That worked on the basis that if you allowed anyone in a restricted environment to have a web browser and they had to have access to GitHub, so your proxy allowed it, you can host tools, you can download them. There's a lovely web interface where you can just zip things and bring them back down. But you can also send data back quite easily. So you could do that kind of stuff. So there was a proof of concept there, a reverse shell, which was kind of neat. You set up a repository on GitHub.com, and effectively you check out the commands that you want to run, and you check back in the response, and it was all nice and cool. So effectively, that's what we're talking about. If we were in a room together, I'd yell and go smoke signals back to me to say that you've understood roughly what we're on about there, but everyone's politely on mute. Restricted remote environments might be a new-ish concept for some of you. That's really why this particular set of tools that I'm going to talk about and show demos of later exist. A restricted remote environment, it enables remote access to internal services. So this is a wonderful firewall. Here's some juicy data on the internal servers, and there's a remote worker effectively. So, I mean, you could service this with a VPN dialing right back in. Some interesting fellows just stick a machine out here with RDP on it. We love that because you can guess passwords on it and try and run any exploits when they come up. So effectively, I'm not really meaning just giving a VPN access. I'm meaning giving a full desktop or limited application experience. That's what I mean about a restricted environment. But so far that sounds like just how you would enable remote work, right? But lots of technologies will allow you to do this. Like I said, RDP, Citrix, VMware Horizon for virtual desktop infrastructure. A new one on me relatively recently when I did an Azure test was that they've got this concept of a bastion, and essentially that gives you an in-browser RDP, and it worked really well. But yeah, so I mean restricted remote environments. I don't mean just allowing your remote worker to be able to dial in and access things. This is not giving an employee VPN to do their job, right? There's a desire to limit the data that's going in and the data that's coming out. Not every organization needs a restricted remote environment. Like I say, most people in this pandemic have been sent to work from home. So they need to be able to access the internal resources as if they were in the office, but from their home. That is not this environment. This is where there's a little bit of an extra motivation. So they'll have restricted their environments in certain ways. For examples, they will have disabled file uploads. They will disable drag and drop between your host and the remote environment. They'll have disabled copy and paste buffers, because actually that's very useful. If you can copy something into an RDP session, you can do a lot of things much faster than the tools I'm going to show later. And of course, once you're in that environment, the environment will probably have a web browser in it. You want to make sure that the web browser can't access anything on the internet, ideally, or an allowed list if absolutely necessary. And you certainly don't want to allow things like UDP, ICMP, TCP out to any host on the internet, because they can get things out. So that's getting tools in and getting tools out. Mainly the same techniques as getting tools in, but you also want to ensure that there's no network traffic outbound. So I kind of jumped the gun there saying ICMP and UDP and all that. But yeah, effectively that's what it is. You want to have a restricted environment where the person is allowed to get some sort of desktop access. They're allowed to do some specific tasks on that machine, but they're not allowed to get tools into it themselves and are allowed to get data out of it. That's generally the goal. So why would you build a restricted environment? And the two sort of examples that I've seen on several projects, and I really enjoy these projects when they come up, is one, trust issues. So one customer was looking to outsource, but they wanted to remain in control, which is kind of hard to do. They wanted to allow application developers in an offshore location to be able to dial in and only touch like the development systems, have no joint to production, no way to reach any internal system. So they in that method, we're going to give you the keys to make the application, but we're going to trust that the application isn't backdoored somehow. But we're only going to give you certain access in one environment. So it's got a kind of a logic and a reason to it. So they built the most restricted environment I think I've ever seen. 2 VPNs to get you into a virtual desktop infrastructure, to get you a desktop, and then there was no tools in this, no internet access in it, no way to copy from their laptops in, and that's ultimately what gave birth to the GitHub related tools, because the one thing that they did allow the person to do was access GitHub, because the libraries supporting the application required updates from a repository. So that was it, game over. The tooling was made to get tools in and to extract results because they had to allow the domain github.com. So that was that one. Trust issues or data protection. This is another common one. It's where it's designed to contain sensitive data. So by the very nature of the data that the environment is to possess, they want to make sure as far as they can that the data cannot get out. And that's typically universities or private research or things like that where data scientists need to access and share remotely. It can be intergovernmental, it can be interdepartment, it can be like inter all kinds of things. But the key point there is they need some place to be able to remote in to run the tools that they've been given, but they're not allowed to either add any more tools into it, and they certainly are not supposed to be able to take any of the medical information out because that's a breach of patient confidentiality, that kind of thing. So these are the two things. Trust issues, they don't trust who they've employed, where the other one is we want to make sure as far as possible the data remains. So for doing several engagements like that, it sort of developed my fascination and my love for exotic exfiltration, because you'll come up against challenges which are like, okay, yes, a tool already exists that can exfiltrate something over DNS, but if you just go to the website and download it and then find a way of putting it into the environment, then the antivirus will catch it like all the time. So if you make your own tools in this regard, or if you even make the slightest change to the code base and then recompile it, you're probably going to get around that antivirus check. So that's why I tend to make my own tools for these exotic exfil situations, because I just know the things that are made that are out there are just going to get flagged the second that they touch the disk or whatever of the target. And also, I just enjoyed a bit of development. I'm a failed developer. I trained for years to be an application developer at university, and yeah, didn't get a job, wound up hacking, and actually much happier, I suppose, because I did that. This talk is a tale of two tools, and they're called RDP upload and RDP download because I guess the original use case for RDP upload, which I made several years ago, was an RDP environment, and I've just stuck with the same name. Technically, it works in all the other environments. So to get files into an environment that's restricted, what it does is it base64 encodes the file you want to upload. It then types the full string inhumanly fast. So it breaks it up into like chunks that can be typed, and then it effectively spoofs the key presses. So you've got like 3 seconds to dump the mouse cursor into the remote environment where you want the file to land, and it will just type it. So this is an old technique. I'm not claiming any ownership over the techniques used for either. These are just my tools that implement those techniques. So yeah, pretty simple flow. Hopefully makes sense. You base64 encode because you want to make sure that it's printable characters that your keyboard can type easily. There is problems with internationalization that my tool doesn't tackle with yet. So if you've got like a non-US UK keyboard, that's not going to fly because the character set's going to be different. And there's all kinds of problems like that. But as a proof of concept, and bearing in mind the keyboard that I have, it works for me. RDP download. This is the one that I've made recently. So an engagement last month. I came up against a remote restricted environment. They wanted me to look into it, and they specifically were like, we want to see any way of getting data out, because it was kind of one of those science sharing environments, and they were like, okay, we want to make sure that we've locked it down. They'd spent oodles of money putting in data loss prevention software, network monitoring, all that kind of stuff. So I thought about it and I went, right, well, unless you're recording the video stream of the desktop, unless you're recording that and actually someone's looking into it, what you can do is you can just put the data of the file that you want back out into QR codes or some other kind of graphical style. Because if you think about it, sound and vision, as David Bowie said, you've got sound coming back from most remote environments. Like if it's an RDP, you can hear the system sounds, and you've got the video coming back. So as long as you encode the data so it's either audio or video, you can get it back. and I'm going to be honest, the data rate is dreadful. That's why we're not live demoing any of these tools, because they take forever to type up, and they take forever to QR code back down. So you don't really want to watch it. But the sort of process is very much the same. Base 64 encode it because you want it to be an easy printable character set. QR codes I think can only hold A to Z sort of URL type character sets. And so it works really good. All you're going to do is to reconstitute the file is record the QR codes using a screen recorder and reconstitute the file. So that's pretty much the end of me waffling here. There's now just sort of 2 4-minute videos a piece, one for each tool and one, and then like the end of it. So relatively short talk for me, really. I'm just going to let this one go, and I'll endeavour to mute my mic if I can. And of course, nothing bad happened because on YouTube it'll all look fine. Here is a remote desktop session into an AWS server. Here's the folder for RDP upload, there's the folder for RDP download, and here is the command prompt where I'm going to run the script. So I've opened an Explorer window and I've searched for 404.htm in the C drive. This was just to find an HTML file that's within the C Windows folder. If I open that up in Explorer and we right click in here and we look at the properties, we'll find something a little bit interesting. We'll notice that the zone is my computer, when if you actually look into the internet options and you click security and you look at the zones, there are only 4 and none of them are my computer. There's actually an extra one, zone 0, which is my computer, not shown here by default, and that has much lower security settings than internet local trusted, and we can use that to our advantage here. Press F12 to open the developer console and allow the blocked content. That prompt for allowing blocked content doesn't appear in any of the other zones in the default config, so that's why we have to use a file in C Windows to be in the My Computer zone. Make sure that you've got the console selected, and we come down here and we run the Python script. Python RDP upload is 3 because I've moved it to Python 3. -C is the new flag for giving us the catcher. So I'm going to press enter. I'm going to move the mouse cursor up here into the console and leave it alone. Now that that's completed, we will just press enter in here, and what that's done is that has written the HTML file that we want in here. Now we just have to run RDP upload. I'm actually going to upload a copy of cmd.exe because, you know, why not? It's a valid binary. Python RDP upload 3 again, and we're going to -F for the file, and we're going to give it the cmd copy that I've put here. And when I press enter this time, I'm going to make sure the cursor is here in this text area. And you're definitely going to go and want to get a brew or something here, because that's going to take forever.
Hi. You recording?
Yeah.
Is it done?
No.
You can edit us out, right?
Maybe. I've wasted my life making this thing. I've wasted my life, just wasted my life. You know I can't touch my keyboard at all, not while this thing is going. Can't touch the keyboard at all. Wasted my life, I've wasted my life. Wasted my life, wasted it, you say? Wasted my life, I've wasted my life. Wasted my life making this thing, and nobody's ever gonna use it anyway. Why the heck would you? No one's gonna do it. But it's just like going to Mars. I saw that I could, so I did. But that doesn't stop me thinking that I wasted my life. I've wasted my life. I wasted my life making this thing. It's still going. It's still going. I've had time to write a song while this is going, and we're at 23%. And we are back. The base64 version of the file is up there. If I hit submit query, let me save this file. If we open the zip, we can drag cmd.exe out, and hey, you've got my computer's cmd binary up there in the system, and that's us. We have it up, so that's excellent. That's good for RDP upload, but that's not what we're going to need to do if we're going to use the RDP download. So we go on to the next slide. So, right, why would I go to the lengths of making something, type it up like that? It's really, really slow. As you can see, the point of cutting that video was because it took like an hour to put CMD up, and it's not that big, an exe. But the reason for trying to get it to work inside Internet Explorer 11 on Windows Server 2019 is because that's the only thing that's baked in to that server. So if you're talking about making toolkit for uploading something, it's most likely going to be into a Windows environment that's remote. I've never tested one for running on any other OS than Windows Server. Sometimes when it's virtual desktop, you'll have an easier time because it's going to be like Windows 10 effectively. If it's Windows 10, if you get the desktop version of IE 11, it works a lot better. You don't have to work around any real restrictions to the same extent, but Windows Server IE 11 was a bit of a challenge to get it to work. So, but the reason that you want it to work inside a browser is because I'm trying to make it stealthier than it was. RDP upload is something I made a couple of years ago, and you just dragged it into Notepad. You saved the thing to disk. You used certutil, which is a binary that's available on Windows, and you can use it to base64 decode the file and retrieve the original executable, and that all worked fine. But the problem is, from a defense's perspective, you've touched the disk early in the process. You've saved a base64 encoded file. It looks kind of weird. You then use certutil, which is it's obviously got a legitimate purpose, but it's got to be a flag to the defense because it's a binary that has few. Well, it has a legitimate use, but it has what appears to be malicious use. So the reason that I've tried to make it use a web browser is because I had the thought that, well, I can use the developer toolbar to edit the DOM, and I can put whatever I want in there. That works on everything that isn't IE. It turns out IE 11 is a bit more particular about about how it works. So really, it was about making it a bit more stealthier. It also upped the challenge for me in making RDP upload work this time. So yeah, that was RDP upload. Now you can get tools into the environment. What you got to worry about is getting tools out of it. So that's RDP download. This is the new research that I've been kicking out since that project I did in May. And as we said before, it works using QR codes. There are existing implementations of this technique. It's just that this is by far the one that I made. So here we go. Less talking and straight to the second demo. So last minute hitch with recording the demo here. So I've tested this RDP download script in IE 11 on my Windows 10 machine, and it works fine. Of course, there's a big difference between Windows IE 11 on server and desktop. We kind of hit a problem here where it won't run inside the remote desktop environment we're targeting, which is a bit of a problem. But in any case, we'll assume now that the environment has Google Chrome, which is an absolute cop-out, because Chrome has none of that zone stuff, and it works just fine. But it's good to show the QR code extraction. So what I've done is I've copied RDP download from this folder into RDP upload, so that I can then use the type string. So type string .py is a version of RDP upload where effectively it just wraps a file in a JavaScript document.write command. So if we hit enter and put this in here, you'll see it starting to upload it. Document.write, ATOB means do a base64 decode, and it's just chucking it in there. So obviously that will take about 10 minutes for the tool to be chucked up, so we're not going to watch all that. So now I get to use Google Chrome, whizzy, it all works much better. If we visit http://localhost, chuck that right in, press F12 to get ourselves the console view, and we copy and paste the string that we've just typed up, hit enter, and now we actually finally have RDP download sitting there, and you can make I'll make the desktop go full screen, because now we're gonna actually do the deed. It works quite simply. You choose a file. In this case, I'll pick this one. It'll give you a base64 encode that file, and then it will give you an estimate of how many screens you're going to need. And it's sort of so 73 screens means it's going to take 73 seconds because there's a 1 second delay between each. When I hit Exfil, what it'll do is it'll show an overlay where it'll have a number of QR codes of 150 characters encoded in each of them. And the way that I will exfiltrate this off is I'll use screen recording software. In fact, I'm using OBS, which is an excellent open source tool for this. So I would record the whole desktop session and then later use a script that I've provided to effectively extract the data from the QR codes. So I'm going to do that. So here it is. We've gone and visited localhost and pasted the thing in. Select a file we want to exfiltrate. That base64 encodes it. It tells us there's going to be 73 screens. There's a 1 second delay between each screen, and you'll see multiple QR codes. So anyway, let's just hit go. So all I've done is I've dragged the video into a much better operating system. We've dragged it into a Ubuntu virtual machine, and I've got my extract file .py, which will do the actual busy work. So if I run Python extract file and I give it the video file, what it does is it opens that video, and it takes a snapshot every second. I mean, there's not a QR code in every second of the video, but it will make sure that it's going to get all the QR codes because the browser was introducing a 1 second delay between every round of QR codes being shown. So not all of these images are actually going to be of any value. And when it's done extracting all the images, it will then attempt to reconstitute the data and tell us the file type so that we know what we're dealing with, what we've extracted. So the extraction uses an OS command which is zbarimg, which is a little tool which goes hunting for QR codes inside of images, and it works rather well. I was pleasantly surprised to find out that it discovered more than one QR code per image, hence I can get like multiple rows. So there we go, it's run the file command on the decoded file, and it thinks it is a PNG. So if I do mv decoded to decoded.png, because we think it's a PNG, if I quickly launch Firefox decoded.png, we can see what we've exfiltrated, and it's a Banksy. There you go. Whew. So we got there. That's all for it. So those two tools, the first one uploads it by typing, because there's no reasonable person that's ever going to make a remote environment where the user is expected to do their job and they can't actually type into it. So it's a vector that always works. The downside is it's really slow. It's it's fine on a LAN, on a nice fast LAN connection. On RDP it works really well. You can batter out like 100 characters a second and it's all good. But when I was testing this in the remote environment here, the challenge is that it works reliably at about 10 characters being typed. And there is a chance that it's going to get exposed if the restricted environment has gone so far that it's got behavioural analysis. No one's going to believe that you're typing that fast, so you're going to get flagged. But other than that, it's reasonably stealthy. The RDP download is the new piece of research that's using QR codes as a technique. Like I say, it's existed for a long time. I've seen evidence from several years ago. Sometimes I think I come up with the idea and that's cool and that's clever, and then when I actually about to release the research, I go and look at it and I find someone's already done it and I go, cool. But that's the way life is. You should always just follow the things that interest you, and it doesn't matter if the tool already exists. Implementing your own version of it is going to teach you so much about how that thing works. You're going to learn why certain design decisions are made. And I always sort of say that the sort of number one tool that exists in a certain area of offensive and defensive security is never really the initial tool. It might be the case that the third or fourth implementation is the one that becomes standard. So you've all got an important voice. You're going to be the next generation of cybersecurity consultants. So it's absolutely on you to own these things. Don't just learn how to fire a rifle. Learn how to make your own. Learn how to take someone else's rifle apart and add new bits to it, and you'll be fine. So that's all, folks. And thank you very much for having me.